All right, so can you see my screen? Okay. All right, so the last class we discussed directed writing and its requirements, and I talked about the general approach to directed writing, as you can see, right, and hopefully you made notes on. So we didn't go into the individual requirements of the different tasks that directed writing include, but more of the general approach. And today we are going to talk about the second task, the second question, section B of paper 2, which is the writing paper, and that is the composition, right? And so I did mention this the last time, I believe, that it is very clearly highlighted that you have to attempt only one of the four writing prompts that are given to you. Two of these prompts are, as you can see, they've clearly mentioned that in bold, and they've written either or, and another or for the last one. And there are two pieces, there are two prompts for directed writing, sorry, descriptive writing, excuse me, and right, two prompts for narrative. Now, right, a thing to notice, right, one of the first one, like the two prompts that you're going to get for descriptive writing, one of these is going to give you a location or a situation to describe. Like this one is write a description of a crowded place, right? And it's not just that. The kind of trend that Cambridge has going is that they're going to give you two different time periods or two different situations for that place that you need to describe. So this one is, right, you're describing a crowded place, so keep that in mind, right? These are words that you need to pick up on, because what students tend to do is that, oh, describe a place, and this, like, no, it's a crowded place, right? Not an empty place, not like a regular place, a crowded place, maybe like a market or somewhere else, right? And then they're asking for before and during a sudden burst of heavy rain, right? So all of this is important. This is what's telling you what you need to focus on as far as your description is concerned, right? Sudden, sudden burst of heavy rain, right? So, and then they're giving you uh, two of these. Uh, just a moment, sorry. Okay. And so in your writing, if you do choose to go for a descriptive piece, you have to, you know, keep in mind the crowded place. You have to keep in mind these, and then you describe both the before and during. It's not before and after, it's before and during. Okay, so keep all that in mind. The second one is, right, they're giving you a scenario. It's not a place, it's not a location. They're giving you a scenario, and the focus is more on your feelings and your experiences, right? Basically, feelings you experienced. So describe the feelings you experienced leading up to a challenging event and the feelings you experienced afterwards. Again, right? So this is like a comparative description, right? Leading up to and afterwards, and more about your feelings, right? And the event could be anything. It could be a sporting event, it could be an academic event, it could be any other activity. So that's open-ended. right? But this is not more like this you could say is a physical description, and this one is more of an emotional description, right? And so that's one thing about the topics that are given, right? And this is kind of a trend. So whatever prompts you get in Cambridge will most likely be along these lines. Now, coming to the narrative, right? There are two different ways a prompt is given to you. I believe Haris has joined. Yes. Assalamu alaikum, Haris. Welcome to class. Okay. So there are two different kinds of prompts that are given to you. The first one is, right, it's open-ended. They've given you the scenario around which your story should revolve. So write a story in which something unexpected happens at an important school event. So it's supposed to be a school event. The event's supposed to be important, and what happens is supposed to be unexpected. So these are things that your story should focus on. Okay, it's open-ended because the school event, right, isn't mentioned. What like you normally will like, oh, maybe it was graduation ceremony. Maybe it was a PTM or something like that. It could be anything that you consider or the school considers important, right? It could be a youth talent fest, right? Maybe the school considers that as one of its important annual events, right? Whatever. Now, as you can see over here, they've only given you like a theme for your narrative, right? And it's completely up to you how you approach it. But right, write a story in which this is happening. So, right, however you choose to approach a story, and we'll talk about that on the approaches to narrative writing. But however choose to approach it, the focus, right, for both descriptive and narrative, focus should be the prompt. Right? Stick to the topic that is given to you and write it as Cambridge is expecting you to write it, meaning you know the theme that they've given to you. Do not change the theme to your liking. Do not write something else. Do not stray off topic, because then you'll obviously be losing marks. Cambridge won't grade you as much if you've written something that is not what they asked you to write about. Okay. And so when you develop your narrative, right, you will give maybe some introduction, and then you come to this main point and you talk about what happened, maybe why it happened, and then what happened later, and then what were the effects. Okay, so all of that. So your focus should be the prompt. The second kind of prompt, so this is just the theme. Over here, they've given you a theme, but in sort of a different way. Okay, so this question says write a story that includes the sentence. Now, when they say includes the sentence, that means your story should include the sentence that they've given. When I saw the photograph, the memories came rushing back. So when you're writing your story, okay, first of all, the focus should be on the prompt. So what kind of focus is over here? There's a question? No. Okay. Uh, So what kind of focus are we talking about in this particular? So right, your focus should be on some kind of photograph, right? Whatever kind it is, right? There should be some kind of photograph, right? And some memories attached to it. And a recall of those memories. So you're going to, right, again, your approach to the narrative, however you do it, but this should be the focus, right? And in addition to that, what Cambridge is expecting, let's move this over here. And so what Cambridge is expecting is when you write it, somewhere in your narrative, somewhere in your piece of writing, this sentence should be part of the story. Okay. You can probably change, like, maybe the pronoun, maybe it's not I, maybe it's us, right? And maybe, right, it's you've included this sentence as part of a longer sentence, and so maybe the W isn't capitalized because the W will be capitalized only when it's the beginning of a sentence. And so you can make those minor changes, but this sentence should be part of it. Also, right, Kali, uh, one thing to keep in mind is, right, because Cambridge is giving you this prompt, they've put in like the colon and the inverted commas, right? When you include it in your writing, do not do that. Do not put in the inverted commas. Write it as you would normally write it, right? And so, right, assuming that this is, a separate sentence. So when I, or when we, for example, when we saw the photograph, and then right, whatever. And so do not include the inverted commas because that will be very odd. That will make it, as far as the narrative is concerned, that will make it a piece of direct speech or maybe a dialogue. And a dialogue is, right, not what this is. This is in quotation marks because Cambridge is asking you put this particular sentence in your writing. Okay, so that's one thing, because I've seen students do this and it's really odd, and they just don't get it. So hopefully you do. Okay, hopefully that's clear. Now, that being said, and any questions about the kind of prompts and the way to understand the theme and to focus on it. Any questions regarding that for either descriptive or narrative? None. With silence. So I guess that's a good thing. Okay. So now, right, what I'm going to do. Oops. Right, is I'm going to talk about what is called the writing process. The writing process is something that you can and should utilize for anything that you write. Right? More importantly, in your pieces of text that you're going to produce, not so much in your comprehension answers, not exactly, but in your summary, your directed writing task, and your composition. In your comprehension answers as well, but the approach will be slightly different. And once I'm through with this, I'll like address the fact, the question, the situation where you'll be in your exam hall, giving the exam paper, and what to do in that scenario. So the writing process is like 4 to 5 steps, however you want to number it. And the first step, right, is planning. I'm pretty sure you're like aware of this. It's not a new concept or a new idea to you, but right, actually, we have time right now, right? So it's almost the end of January, and so you have February and March, and so you've got those 2 months to practice, and hopefully, right, you can make use of it. As I'd like to say that we have the luxury of time, right, and so we make good use of that luxury. And so what we have, the first thing we want to do is plan, right? So during planning, right, you want to gather your ideas, right? You want to plan out the vocabulary that you're going to use, right? Especially topic specific. So it's also called specialized vocabulary, if you want to go into that kind of terminology. And you want to uh, plan the organization of your writing, right? And that would include uh, which points you want to mention first, which you want to mention later, and also check if some of your points are repetitive, and maybe you want to uh, fine tune that. So, right, and how are you going to do the planning? Well, you can do it as bullet points. You can do it as numbering. You can do it as that cloud diagram that maybe you did in your lower classes. You could make it like a flow chart or something, or like a spider diagram. Like, you could do it any way. It's planning, right? It's really up to you, whatever you feel comfortable with, as long as you're doing it, right? So as long as you're planning it, and right, you might come across the term brainstorming, which I used to use, right? You might also come across mind mapping, not mopping, mapping, right? So, I mean, whatever you want to call it, right? Plan out your writing. Then the next thing we have, right, is producing a rough draft. Right, so what do we do in a rough draft? Well, we write out the task. So whether it's a summary or a letter or a narrative, as it should be. Right. So because you've gathered your ideas and you've done this work of yours, the organization and everything, and so you're writing it out. And what you'll notice is that when you've planned it first and then you're writing it out, you'll find it easier to write. You'll find it easier to create flow in your writing, to organize it, to make it coherent, and to fit in your ideas. And overall, it will be a much smoother process as compared to if you just jump into writing without thinking about it, and you're struggling to come up with ideas on the go. Okay, what should I write now? Or okay, going back. And the thing is, as an examiner and as a teacher, if I look at a piece of writing, I can very well tell whether the student gave it some thought or not, whether the students gave some time to plan out their work before writing it, or they just jumped into it without thinking about it. Okay, it's something that speaks for itself. So it's not like it won't be noticed. Now, in an exam, right, will the will you be marked for planning? Like, if you're uh, to the examiner, if it seems that you didn't plan it and it seems a bit random, that you are struggling to write it, well, not in that sense, right? But in the sense that because your writing will speak for itself, that it wasn't planned out properly, and so the way it's written will not be as good, and so that will reduce the quality of your writing, and that's where you will lose marks. Okay. Okay, so the rough draft is writing out the task as it should be. So you are writing out the narrative as a full story, keeping in mind all the requirements, right? All the requirements. So paragraphing, format, whatever it is, right? The particular theme, the particular prompt, the particular style they've told you to write it in, anything, right? All the instructions, all the requirements, you keep that in mind and you write it as it should be written. But right, this is not the one that you're going to submit, so to speak. So the next step is editing. And at this point, you'll be wondering, well, we can't do this in an exam, and you're partially correct. right? That this detailed process is not something that you'll be able to do in an exam. So what you'll do in an exam, I'll come to that. Okay, now what you want to do is editing, right? So that is addition, right? And overall changing and improving your writing, right? And possibly, subtraction and reorganization. So once you're done with your rough draft, and this is the difficult part because to me, my own writing seems really good. Like I haven't made any mistakes, right? It can't get better than that. And that's obviously not true, right? Myself as a teacher, when I go back and check what I've written, I find some mistakes. I find some, parts of it which I can improve. Maybe I decide on removing an entire part, changing it, adding something new, whatever, right? And so that is something that can be done and should be done. And so what you want to do is you want to go back and look at your own work critically, right? In your head, maybe you can think like, okay, fine, this is not my work. I'm checking someone else's work, and that becomes easier, right? So it's easier to pick out mistakes when it's not your work, it's someone else's work. Right? In fact, we're rather eager to pick out mistakes when it's someone else's work. Even if it's not a mistake, you're like, no, this is wrong. And so you have to be critical about it. You have to go back, read what you've written once you're done with it, and and what kind of mistakes are you looking for? So you're obviously looking for mistakes in grammar. So you're looking for mistake in tenses. You're looking for mistakes in punctuation, right? You're looking for spelling mistakes, maybe the vocabulary that you've used, right? And stuff that we'll, cover later, like subject verb agreement, perhaps, or the sentence structure. So, I just put that under grammar. And so those are the kind of mistakes you're looking for. Then again, right, I've mentioned organization. So, right, organization, the sequencing of your ideas, right, the coherency. So whether it's making sense, whether what you're saying and what you've written align. So whether you can understand from your writing what it is that you're actually trying to say, because it happens many a times that the student might be thinking of something that I want to say this, but the way they've written it is not giving that meaning. Okay, and so you want to try and do that. You want to try and obviously write it in a way that expresses what you want to say, right? And so you might want to change something. So that's the addition, changing and improving. You might want to add something. You might want to remove something. You might want to move the points around, right? Check all of this. And right, so that is the editing process, and it can be time consuming, depends, right? And once you're done with all of that, right, and right, so the fourth part, right, so I mean you can go back and forth between these two for as long as you like. I personally, like in one of my classes, I demonstrated a piece of descriptive writing in class, and I managed fairly well, I guess, but as far as the student was concerned. But then I sat down and I reread it, and I thought that maybe I can improve it, make some changes. And I actually went through three different revisions, right? So I changed part of it, and then I, okay, fine. And then I checked that, and I made some more improvements and more improvements. And so I revised it three times, and then I finally got to a point where I said, yeah, okay, fine. So this is, you know, good enough. It's right. And, changing it anymore is like, there really isn't much to improve on it, given, where we are. So it goes for everyone, and especially US students. And so once you're done with all that, you rewrite it, right, with all the changes or corrections or overall improvements that you've made, right? And that will be your final draft. Okay. Now, question is what to do in an exam. We don't have time in an exam to, do all of this. And that's true. But, right, you can do the planning and you can do the editing after you write it out. So the point is that during this time that you have to practice, you go through this entire process every time you're writing, whatever it is you're writing, even the summary, right? Uh, Kind of like your comprehension questions as answers as well, because once you've written your answer, you want to check, okay, fine, am I answering the question? Have I included the points that I want to include? And if there's nothing missing, right? And there's no spelling mistake or anything, even though spelling mistakes aren't the criteria unless you like really messed up. So that's a different thing. But grammatically, your comprehension answers aren't graded. It's not a grading criteria, but still, like you want to be accurate. And so what you can do, right? And so what will happen is once you've practiced this enough, you've gone through this process enough, and so in an exam without having the time to do a rough draft and then to edit it meticulously and then write a final draft, what you'll be able to do is what you write should be decent enough in the first go, but still give yourself 5 to 7 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, depending on the time you could say 1 hour for each, right? And so if you have 1 hour for your composition, 5 to 7, maybe 10 minutes on planning. And how you can do that? You can do that, right, with a pencil. You can do that on the main page. You can put a heading of planning and you can do your bullet points or however you want to do it. And if you're doing it in pencil, the examiner will not check it. Even if you're doing it in pen, it's not, part of the answer. It's not something the examiner is going to check, right? So you can do it on the main page if you want it right in front of you, if you don't want to keep flipping over. You can also do it on the blank page. All right, so there are always blank pages. So if I just go to the question, right? So, right, this is your question paper, and right, okay, apparently this one doesn't have a blank page. And so what you can do, however, is you can, plan over here. You've got this blank space over here. It's not a blank page, you've just got some space over here. And so you can plan over here. Maybe like your actual question paper will have a blank page, and so you can plan over there in pencil, right? Just don't write in the part of the paper, the area of the margin where it says do not write here. If it says do not write here, do not write there. Okay, but anywhere else you can put it in pencil, and you can put down your ideas, maybe some words that are coming to mind that are specific to the topic, and you note them down, right? Those words can be any part of speech, especially, right, describing words. So adjectives and adverbs and the verbs themselves, right? Right, maybe a particular preposition that you want to use. So anything that you can jot that down, and then you can get to write and write the points. Maybe you want to uh, hint like how you're going to do it. I can't tell you how you're going to do it, but maybe you want to give a hint towards your organization, that which point you're going to mention first and which points you're going to mention later. And then what you write is sort of like the final draft. And so you're going to write it out directly, the whole task, you're going to write it out. And once you're done writing, and possibly even during writing, you're thinking, this doesn't seem right. And so you will do, once you have written or during writing, you will maybe cross something out or change a word or something. And remember, correction fluid in Whito isn't like ink erasers aren't allowed. So if you've written something, right, and in fact, better yet, right? So you've written something over here, and you're like, no, this is incorrect. This is what this is not what I want to write. And so don't do this. Don't do this. Don't do that. Okay? Plain and simple, with a pen. You don't need a ruler, right? Just do that. Make sure that this strike out, right? That you struck out this word or this, right? It's clear. If it's a lengthier piece of writing, like maybe 2, 3 lines, for example, right? Maybe possibly a paragraph. And so what you want to do, just like that, 2 diagonal lines or 1 diagonal line, depending, and you just, and the examiner will understand, okay, fine, so this part has been crossed out. Okay, do not make it untidy. Don't do that. All right. And so you will do, the editing on what you've written. You're not going to rewrite the whole thing, and you're going to be careful about the tidiness of your work. And hopefully by the end of that, even though you've written it once and you've gone over you've tried to improve it somewhat, if you found some mistakes or you want to move something about possibly, then right, you do that. Overwriting, like not overwriting, like if you struck something out, right, like over here, and then on top of that you write, okay, so right, that's not what I wanted to write. I write this, right, I wanted to write this, not what I've written. And so if it's legible to the examiner, like you think, okay, fine, so I struck this out, and even though I've written this as something small, or maybe I've put like an arrow over here, an arrow over here, so it's like below or above, and I've written something, and as long as it makes sense and it's readable, legible meaning readable, properly readable to the examiner, then the examiner will read it and they will consider it as part of your answer and they will grade it. Okay, so that's all about the writing process and what you should do while you're practicing right now for the exam, and how you're going to apply this writing process in your exam. So you've only got like a few minutes, right? I'm not moving on to a new topic right now because we won't be able to cover it. But if there's any question about anything that I've mentioned in today's class, go ahead and ask, please. Anything? Or any question in general, like maybe something we haven't talked about yet, or we talked about in a previous class, and you're working on your papers, you're practicing. So yeah, go ahead and ask if there's any question. Nothing? Right? All's clear, all's good. All right, that's good to know. Okay, that's positive sign. Good. Okay, so the next time, right, we'll look into some of the other things that we want to cover that I mentioned earlier, right? So, all of this vocabulary, and I mentioned contextual meaning, understanding context, all of these. So these are the reading skills, and then the writing skills, right? So we're going to perhaps talk about some grammar skills and sentence building. Anything I talked about the general writing for the directed writing, right? So paragraphing. So we're going to cover these topics in the following classes, and yeah, and hopefully in the few classes at the end, maybe in March or before that, we'll come to the paper and we also practicing. Get to have hands-on practice with. We did do intensive reading once, so scanning for the answers and identifying. So all of these go together, right? With the summary separating the main idea from details, and contextual meaning. So that's again comprehension thing, and for directed writing as well, and all of these, right? So yeah, so now we have like a theoretical. We've gone through the paper theoretically, and some of the requirements, and so we're going to delve more into the skills that are required. Then go through the paper, at least one paper, maybe two, for sake of practice and reinforcement. All right, so yeah, I'll end there. Right, we ended a bit early today, but that's fine. And I'll meet you again on Thursday, inshallah. All right. All right then. Fi amanillah.